Are you saying I'm not saying like my wife often makes for Christmas like
kills you so fast you can't sort it.
So I have a pair of blue and orange kangaroos and a pair of pink and tan kangaroos. Yes, they do. I love them. They're too popular in Germany. Did you see? I said that about kangaroos 1 year. Hey, I'm so we can get
Yeah, you would.
I didn't realize there's no difference. I didn't know that. It's a lot of fun, but it's complete.
It would be we would have to bring. So it would be something. But we wouldn't have to talk about.
The one, yeah, 1, 2,
We'll have that when we're going to be
3,
doing
4,
compensation meetings. Yeah. And I think it would be good. It's the only reason I.
7, 8 are like 5. Yeah, like just a transition thing. And then one for IBC.
Yeah. Well, what else?
It's just there. So you're allowed to lie, whatever you never see.
double A.
Yes.
I think it's
Yeah, how the crazy. I'm gonna get a, I'm gonna get the same time.
But
Do you need a perimeter?
Yes. Yes. And I told them they were basically square size round, just measuring for measure.
in that existing.
And
Okay, I was like,
No, they're the one in that.
And on
where were you?
Yes.
And I realize their parents too. I mean, that's where it gets great and but it's just
I would have. That's all. Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm not a songwriter. I'm not
Oh, yeah.
so she's one of them.
What?
It's just, you know, for those that are on YouTube, you know.
Now she's only been in.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Jim Welch, I'm the president of the Kingsport Board of Education. Call the special call meeting to order. Welcome those of you who are here with us in person and those of you who are joining us via YouTube. The purpose of tonight's call business meeting is to deal with a motion that was tabled and rescheduled for a special call meeting on this evening at our meeting on February 9th, having to do with potential revision of the school calendar.
Thank you so much. We did want to come back to you with two items this evening regarding calendar revision. The first is the discussion that we had about the relocation of all the rate in 2020 back to that discussion when we last met, we had asked for some additional time to gather some input and consideration here administratively. After hearing those bits of information and after having some internal considerations, we are at this point asking to withdraw the administrative recommendation to relocate fall break, again, based on this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tracy. The administration has withdrawn for consideration and change in the originally published dates of the fall. Is that correct?
Correct. This would mean that it is currently, if the withdrawal of the recommendation is agreeable, it would be the fall break of October 11th.
Without objection from any of the board members, the recommendation will be withdrawn. Is there any objection from a board member? Having no objection, that is withdrawn, and so the date of fall break remains at its original schedule. Next item deals with the in-service date.
Yes, when we relocated spring break of 22, which was originally March 28th through April 1st, we moved that to March 14th through the 18th. Again, part of that consideration was a request from the high school because of the trip to Ireland, we needed some participation over that spring break period. So we moved that. When we did that, that overlapped a planned in-service day that had been scheduled for Monday, March 14th. So we do need to address that, relocation of that in-service day. The recommendation that we bring to you tonight is to move that date to Monday, March 21st. Again, we visited the conversation previously about having in-service days on Mondays to be best suited for instruction and delivery for our teachers. So that then would shift that in-service day again to Monday, March 21st is the recommendation.
So the recommended action is to move the in-service day originally scheduled for March 14th, 2022 to Monday, March 21st. That's correct. There a motion from the board member? Second? Second. Moved and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes, so that schedule change has for in-service day on March 21st. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Vice President Myers has asked for a moment of make a point of personal privilege.
I just want to make it aware that there is the last week of February is Songwriters Week. And this year, Kingsport is participating in a virtual Songwriters Week. And I just want to make sure people are aware of that. I couldn't wait for the committee at our next meeting because it's happening right now. This whole week, you can join in. There's a lot of local songwriters. Some of them are very well known. But if you follow Facebook Live and you go to @Visit Kingsport, you can join in and participate with the local songwriters, see what they have to say, and share in the festivities. And so that's happening now through the end of the month, and I just want people to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to the community's attention. Ms. Byers, at this point, we will adjourn the special call meeting, take a brief break, and rejoin for our work session. This meeting is adjourned. Take a break. Which one?
Yeah, it's good.
I think someone will flash through pretty quick.
We got a presentation one. Awful.
I will now call to order this Kingsport City School Board of Education work session. We're beginning with school reports as well. Welcome.
Thank you.
For joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm Heather Wolf. I'm the principal at Washington Elementary, and I'd like to share with you tonight the portrait of a patriot. First, I'd like to let you know that we have 503 patriots in our school, ages 6 weeks to 5th grade, which of course includes our Early Childhood Learning Center and a district-wide specialized learning environment for communication behaviors. We are 86% white, 8% black, 2% Asian, and 4% undisclosed. We have 25.33% economically disadvantaged and 15% special education population. Our fall attendance rate is at 96%, and we think they come to school for 3 hours, but they're not the 3 hours you make. These are relationships, relevance, and rich opportunities. Let me talk to you a little bit about why relationships are so fundamental at Washington. The way the school was designed many years ago with an open concept fosters collaboration among adults and students. And so it developed a really strong belief that relationships are at the root of everything we do. So here are a few examples of that. In kindergarten and first grade, students keep the same teacher. So they enter kindergarten and they loop to first grade with that teacher. The reason for that is we feel like kids have left a significant 5-year relationship with a family or caregiver and are entering school, and we feel like an additional shorter term, strong foundational relationship is most optimal for learning and growing. So they keep their teacher 2 years when they come into school. Some of these are environmental factors that focus on relationships, like the way our classrooms are set up. Students sit at tables rather than desks because we want them to communicate with each other, collaborate with each other, cooperate while they're learning with their peers. Our cafeteria that we lovingly call the Cherry Tree Cafe is designed with round tables and stools. Children come in as a whole grade level and in years other than this, self-select their seating so that they can meet with peers who they want to share food and fellowship with. Socialization is encouraged at lunch. Also, at Washington, we start every day with a morning meeting. That means the first 20 to 30 minutes of the day is dedicated to practicing communication skills as a family, solving problems as a class when conflict arises, and developing self-regulation skills. These opportunities allow children to recognize that the kids in their class all have separate realities, but through respect and communication, we can learn to live harmoniously. In years other than this year, our related arts classes are attended by mixed groupings of students. So rather than going with your home-based class, the 4 classes in that grade level are mixed during related arts, because we also want children to find connections with peers. You may not find your best friend in your home-based class, but you may have a strong connection with somebody in your grade level. And so we provide that opportunity in order to foster those relationships. The next topic for our second R was relevance. Teachers at Washington work really hard to create relevant learning experiences for students. That first happens through the quality curriculum resources we have. The literacy and math tasks demand problem solving from students, and often when you see a math task being presented, there's an open-ended math concept being offered to students. After taking some private time to think themselves, they collaborate with peers at their table to seek multiple solution paths to find the one that is the most efficient. As well as during literacy, you'll see dialogue and discourse that is focused on texts, and children will agree and disagree with one another, attempt to contradict one another respectfully, and really dig into the critical thinking that they need to. Secondly, our school has a strong base in project-based learning units. We've been working on training in that topic for about 5 years, and the majority of the staff research, work with community mentors who come in and guide students before, during, or after a project. And always ends with the presentation of a public product that students either present to family, community, or school educators.
Ms. Wolf, you might share the story that you shared last week.
About the
And then-
engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's coming up in a minute, so I'll.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
all right,
I have slides to go with it.
there you go.
The other piece of making school relevant is helping kids to realize that there's more to being a well-developed person than just your academics. We have a quote in our office that states, "It's highly important that you endeavor not only to be learned, but virtuous," from George Washington. So we have developed as a school over the past several years what we call our Patriots Promise. Each letter of Patriot represents a particular life skill that we are teaching and living at our school. What we're most proud of in the development of these skills is that you're going to hear these discussed in PE, in the cafeteria, in the office, in reconciliation conferences with parents and students, and best of all, when they go home and their parents share stories with us that they share, they couldn't give up on something because they learned they needed to share the message. And so that's wonderful to hear.
You guys have a Patriot Card program.
Yes, so we also take time to recognize students who demonstrate those 8 skills. Anytime a teacher witnesses one of those skills being demonstrated, they issue a card to a student, and usually a sticker, and I don't know how we got into this habit, but they end up sticking the card to their shirt. And it's actually been a great thing because they get in the car and their parents immediately say, you know, "What Patriot skill did you show today? I see you worked hard." Or they're walking down the hallway and I can say, "Oh my goodness, what did you have that for today?" You know, and it's a sort of pride and conversation around those skills that we think are so important. The S in our Patriot Promise represents service, and that's another way we think learning is relevant at our school, is that whether it's something as simple as the black and white pictures you can see on the right, this everyday act of kindness, we are accentuating that we will work to serve others. And or it might be as large as the socks you see here, where we have a school-wide project where using puffy paint, we created non-slip socks for our partnering nursing. So we look for opportunities for children to know that they should always do for others. Okay, here's the slide. So we also provide relevance to students by giving them opportunities to have career exploration and the type of critical thinking that STEM challenges provide. So once every 9 weeks, we have STEM challenges. Students are given about 2 hours in the morning. We present this STEM challenge. Students work over that period of time to imagine a solution, plan it and draw it out, create the prototype, test the prototype, and make some sort of iteration to the prototype. And this is a new practice we have started this year. And one of the things we've enjoyed most about it is comments from kids like Dr. Norman's reference, the little girl who said to her teacher, "When am I going to get to be an engineer again?" She really enjoyed that day. And so they really look forward to the challenge. It also provides collaboration and communication skills. So the last R was rich opportunities. If you haven't seen rich opportunities already, I'll share a few more with you. But there are a couple of things we consider co-curriculars because in an effort to teach the whole child, they're not extra to us, they're equally as important. So you're going to see things that might occur both during the school day and after the school day. For example, we have a school broadcast team called WSMC who present a daily broadcast of the news to the school. It is the scripts and the anchoring, producing is all run by students. We also have things like our Lego League. We have a partnership with Small Miracles for our special education students. We have celebrations of learning each year where all students are offered an opportunity to be on stage, dancing, singing, or performing once a year. And then we aren't able to do club days in our traditional format this year, but in typical years, we do something called club days. It is a co-curricular activity once every 3 weeks where students choose an area of interest that they would like to explore. We believe that whether it's as simple as cooking, or gardening, or sign language. They are seeking an opportunity to tap into a talent that might otherwise go unnoticed, or develop passion for something they may not otherwise recognize. And students in grades 3 through 5 register for those clubs online, replicating the registration process you might use in college, and younger students do it through survey. And they rotate those every quarter, so they get 4 opportunities a year to explore a topic of interest. And then lastly, what would I do if I had $25,000? I only have one thing listed here because personnel in grades K to 1 would make a significant impact on the foundational learning that we're trying to do with children. Whether it's this year or any other year, children enter kindergarten with a broad range of experiences and knowledge. And in order to teach responsibly to those needs that they enter with, small group instruction is what we find to be most effective. And in order to do that effectively, the more adults we have, the more groups we can have going at one time, and we can meet their needs more rapidly and more specifically. And so if I were to have 2 more people at the K1 level, I could provide that coverage of support for a longer duration of the school day.
So, thank you. So, what have you found to be your greatest opportunity as a school leader, given the circumstances of this year?
Greatest opportunity, I think, is for me to not lose sight of our vision and think creatively about how we can still provide those core philosophical pieces that we think are so important to kids in a new and different way. That's been a challenge this year, but one we really tried not to lose sight of because we thought it was in the best interest of our students.
Thank you. Your turn now.
Well, I love that you asked that question, and I want to embellish on what Ms. Wolf said, because this was really lined up what I wanted to drop. What a great job she did with this is Washington Elementary was doing work around project learning. Some of those big challenges that they were talking about. And obviously, it would have been easy to have said, because of the COVID, that this was not something that we were going to pursue this year. But Ms. Wolf, in conversation, she had said, I feel like it's, I don't know that we're there, but we need to keep moving forward. Regardless of the situation, we need to keep moving forward. This is part of who we are. I need my staff to see that situations are challenging, but we're continuing to move forward. And just recently, so in doing that, the framework in doing that has been to utilize the Tennessee School Innovation Network, it's TSIN. And so with that, and that's the same group that went through and certified DBE as a STEM school. If you went down there, you would see this from TSIN. That was the organization that certified DBE as a STEM school. Ms. Wolf entered Washington Elementary into that same process. And so having a rubric to look at the STEM challenges to determine quality, to have an outside entity being willing to come in. They submitted their application. We don't know where that will go. I mean, but what I appreciate the fact is that it was a challenging year. It would have been easy to say no. They continue to lean in. If they don't get that certification, they'll get feedback on what they need to do to be able to continue to move forward. But just incredibly grateful for them continuing to keep the ball moving forward, because the path that they kind of chart out creates a path for some of our other elementary schools to see how to do that and how to implement that. Because some of the things that happen are unique to Washington, but we would love to get to see those experiences replicated across the district as well.
I just have two quick questions. One was on, if you're not the big stuff of the radar, so how do you schedule that? And the second question is, tell me about some of the state challenges that are in the picture.
So, the scheduling is not as complex as you might think. We have our related arts team and our administrator and counselor sit down and look at the groups of kids. We start grouping them kind of randomly, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we proceed with looking at dynamics of the groups we've created and alter them, making sure everybody has some unity and everybody has a strong connection that they've already had. So they're at a comfort level in those classes. And then they still attend those all at the same time. So the whole grade level would go to related arts at the same time. We just line them up differently. So one classroom, all the number ones would go to another classroom, all the number twos, and then they transport them to those classes. So it's done primarily by hand and then occurs all at the same time. And then some of the STEM challenges. So in the fall, we had a few that were related to the season of fall. We had some kindergarten and first grade students who had to create a machine that would pick up leaves that did not require someone to bend over. And so they worked on creating a prototype for that. We brought in big boxes or tubs of leaves and they tested their products. In third grade, they had a boat they had to create that could cross a certain distance, carry a certain weight without singing. That was a fairly typical one that's been used before. Around Christmas time, we had some that laying on the shelf being that students could create a machine that would allow an elf to now break a portion of the contents of his bag, moving from one place to another. But they were different by grade level. So the kindergarten and first grade students might be creating a sled that could carry a certain number of things without dropping them at a certain level of ramp, whereas the fifth grade might have done something more sophisticated. They actually had to create a vest, safety vest, really that prevented impact and did not cause them to lose the belongings to the spirit. But the process was good.
It's the process.
Yes, and so each time we have found different ways to make it exciting, make people interested, and they have now started, like I said, asking forward to the next time we get to participate.
A little biased.
I hope so.
I love Washington so much that we moved into the area. Sent our kids there. I think so we graduated 3 through there, and our last 2 are still there. I was asking my school, I was saying it's a great day. It's a great day. You ask your high schoolers, and they say some of the most fondest memories we've got in elementary school. It's not a slam on high school or middle school. They just love their time in Washington. And I love this picture that you have up here. Of the little girl, holding the door open, and the other kid helping somebody to shoot. Because you see them all the time. Even if they drop the pickup line or the drop off in the mornings, you see little kids hopping out of the car, running the next kid, throwing their arm around, and they walk into school together. So I think you've done a fantastic job, and all the teachers and the entire staff of fostering that kind of friendship, because these are the friendships that last sometimes the rest of their lives. Everyone can remember somebody from elementary school they make friends with, because there's no inhibitions to talk at that age. They just love talking to each other, making friends. And I'm just, like I said, I'm biased. Hopefully if grandkids come along, they're going to care if they move to this side of town.
Well, we've got all the other grades.
It's true. The numbers, I think it'll be 20 Goldens that go through that school by the end of it. So,
We have our blessings on that. So far, so good.
we apologize.
Seeing no one. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I'm Kelly, senior, I'm principal at Sevier Middle School. I think it's important first to recognize the administrative staff of the home. We have Nick Rafiki, who's the assistant principal, and Luke Dallas, who's the assistant principal. And most of you know it's my first year at Sevier, so I would be remiss in not thanking them for welcoming me and teaching me the ways of Sevier. It's been a blessing and a year for me, to say the very least. So thanks to Nick and Luke. So a little bit about our demographics. We have just right at 800 students enrolled. 706 of those are face-to-face. We have 93 that are remote choice learners. 44.8% of our students are designated as economically disadvantaged, and 15% are students with disabilities. This is an important time to note that at Sevier we house a functional academic 3 program, as well as a middle school communication and behavior program, which falls under special ed designation. And just under 1% of our students are English language learners. I wanted to show you this because this is what we spent a lot of time talking about this year as a faculty and staff. It's our plan for this year. And going in as a new principal, I thought it was important that we work with the leadership team and the faculty to come up with a plan of where we're trying to go this year. Dr. Warnhouse mentioned and Ms. Wolf mentioned that this was a bit of a challenging year, but we thought it important, more so than ever, to come up with a plan. So I'll just hit the high points. We want to create and implement a culture that's responsive to student and staff needs, academically and socially and emotionally. We want to develop and promote a growth mindset among staff and students. And then focus our collaboration time with our staff on the needs of our students and what we need to be reflective about and change so our students will be most successful. So we think if that we can do these things, that we'll have some deeper and more sustained levels of student engagement and learning. And if you look at the small bullet points under there, you'll see those are very specific to this year, a lot about virtual learning, distance learning, how we continue to support students socially and emotionally, and make sure that we're offering relevant professional learning for teachers for this year, because we've done a lot of hybrid work, we've done a lot of virtual work, and that's created a bit of a learning curve for some of us. One of the things that I think is really special about Sevier that I wanted to share is their response to student needs, and you'll see that this covers the basis that we're talking about, the social emotional piece and the academic piece. Thank you for giving us a full-time panel counselor to have at Sevier that has made a huge difference, particularly this year with our students. We're able to offer academic and behavioral interventions before and after school tutoring. We started a regroup this year at Sevier every morning between 7:05 and 7:45. Students there's a designated place if they need to regroup, whether that's because they had a rough morning at home, trying to get out the door, or they ran out the door and as middle schoolers do sometimes they forgot to put on deodorant or brush their teeth. We have those supplies so they can take care of that in a dignified way and not worry about that all day. That seems to be a successful place to go. We have some students who just need a calm time in the morning, so they're not ramped up before they go into class, and that's been successful. We also have Warrior Academy, which is a support for students who are struggling in a regular academic setting, but we want to keep them at Sevier versus thinking about alternative placement. And we really focus on how to be a student, what needs are not being met that are causing behavior problems or struggling in the classroom. This year we really focused on how we maximize our in-person instructional time. Again, we're in high school, we've had virtual and hybrid, so we really focused our conversations around we
we have kids 2 days a week. We're working on, organizing and developing a math and ELA class. So really focusing on students who, have had some learning loss this year for a variety of reasons, and how we can provide some remediation for them. And there's people working, then we are beginning to work on our summer camp this year, as you know, and design that. Even as late as recent as today, trying to make that a fun and reaching opportunity, but also covering some of those skills that might have been lost this year. So another thing that we enjoy doing at Sevier is Wedding Warrior. Students spend time during our social, we have a block that's designated for social emotional learning. Part of that time each week is spent on goal setting. Typically it's around academics, but it could be around behavior. And Way of the Warrior is a way to celebrate when students reach their goals or they've just shown a tremendous amount of growth. So that's something that we love to do. So I think it's important to know that with the year we've had, things are sort of getting back to normal. We're preparing for an upcoming production of Thousand Dolls. We have lots of lumber recently delivered for that building. We're planning a spring band concert. Those may be a little different than in the past. Talked about posting those outside, similar to what TV has done in the fall. But it's exciting to me that those things are, we're starting to keep those things like that. It's exciting for students because some of our seventh graders have only had one performance in their middle school career because they had a holiday concert last year, but they did a spring concert, a holiday concert this year. So this is exciting for them, and you can feel the buzz and excitement when you visit those classrooms. So you probably know the athletics that we offer all of these videos in high school athletic program, but that's just a quick synopsis. Most of those have taken place so far this year. Wrestling was a little iffy. We did a lot of quarantining in wrestling. And some in basketball, it seemed like we either had a boys team or a girls team in quarantine. But we got through it, we made it. Baseball, softball, and golf, track and field are all underway and practicing. It's been fun. Golf was practicing in the library yesterday. Their putting skills, so you never know what we can find. Some other opportunities we have for our students, of course, robotics, again, that's part of our vision that we want to continue. So we have three staff that have volunteered and have kept that up and running this year. Even when we were hybrid or virtual, maybe not when we were virtual, but when we were hybrid, students came in and met. A new thing at Sevier this year is a student leadership ambassador. We've identified students that are leaders at Sevier and are working to provide them with some unique opportunities with a community and leadership within the building. I know you all know about our Supporting Scribe. It's a nationally recognized newspaper. And I have to be honest with you, I did not understand the magnitude of the newspaper until I was there. And I was like, this is like legitimate. This is a newspaper. I was blown away by that. We have students can be a part of the yearbook staff. We have national helpers. So that's another piece that I think is good. A strength for Sevier is we have lots of opportunities for students to try to, so everybody can find a niche. Because that's part of the thing, right? Is to find your niche and what you want to do. So how would we use $25,000? Very similar to this. I think we would hire an additional support personnel for students in intervention. I did have one other thought I got submitted in. I had several other thoughts, but one that might actually work. And that would be transportation for after school. Lots of our students are prohibited from being part of the robotics team, the golf team, track and field, whatever, because transportation is a struggle. be a tie for me. This year I'm leaning more toward the intervention piece because of the year we've had, but I don't know, but you can't, it's hard for me to think about how you can replace the experiences kids have with extracurricular activities. So, can we have 50,000? So that's a little bit about Sevier. That's kind of what we've been doing this year. Lots of learning, like I said, learning and listening on our part, and lots of flexibility and grace with our staff.
So I come to you with the same question I had. What has been your biggest opportunity in terms of being a school leader under what all COVID-19 has brought about? And I'm especially interested, not for one that's in person, but because of your transition. This is your first year as a middle school. So you weren't just going through a little bit of change, you had this was the icing on top of it.
Yeah, it has been a year of change, but I think, what I hope I've done as a leader is model stability, problem solving, and a learner's mindset. That's what's been required is we're continually solving new problems that don't have answers. We can say, oh, well, in the past we've not been, we've never had a past like this. So I hope as a leader that's what people have seen is that we're always trying to solve that problem when we're persevere, but also like Heather mentioned, not losing sight of that vision, not losing sight of what makes us special.
Jane?
It's kind of like Jim's question, but I'd like to know, get a feel for what keeps you up at night looking forward, not kind of in reflection of this year, but how things are coming back together. Are there things that you're extremely concerned about, that you guys talk about?
Yes. There are things that keep me up at night. One of those things is looking forward. How do we compensate for what students might have lost in the last couple of years? How do we ensure that the students that we're sending to Dawkins are ready to be there and to be successful there? How do we? This is a thing that keeps me up at night. Typically, we're overcoming students who have been away from us for 8 weeks in the summer. So we're trying to teach them again how to be students. This time, what I keep going back to is it's almost been a year since they've been a full-time student. And so how do we teach them how to be a student again? And how do we overcome the time they spend away from us and the habits they might have developed? How do we get them back in the school mindset? So those things keep me up at night. The other thing that keeps me up at night is how do we continue to provide the support that our students, particularly in the middle school, how do we continue to provide and meet their social and emotional needs, but also preparing them academically for careers that we don't know exist. And will I be forward thinking that, and will I find the right resources to ensure that we get there?
I appreciate that. That's, like you said, there's no model to reflect upon, either in reflection or prospective actions and what you're gonna do. It's and this is your first year. I can't imagine walking into that. So hats off to you for taking that on in such an unusual time.
Well, that goes back to the staff that I mentioned, not just Nick and Luke, the administrative staff, but really the staff in general. I would not have made it, maybe the first week. If it hadn't been for the support of everybody. I mean, everybody in that school has stepped up and said, this is what we do things, this is what we need to think about. And they felt safe enough to come and say, hey, Kelly, I hear what you're saying, but that's not a good idea. Or, hey, did you remember that we still have to do X, Y, Z?
hearing you say modeling too, as a leader. Anybody that's had a child, either had one or have had them like I have, it's all, they're gonna do what you do more than you tell them what to do. And the same is true of leadership. And I appreciate your awareness of that. That will build culture to me as much as anything. So, good luck to you moving forward with this.
It's funny you mentioned about transportation, because in my mind, I was wondering how many kids are prohibited from doing stuff, especially with 45% socioeconomic disadvantage. But my question is, what do you think, what is your percentage of students that can participate or do participate in extracurricular activities? Obviously, there's a pretty broad spectrum, some of them during the day, some obviously after.
That's a great question, and this is going to be a total opposite estimate. But I would say maybe 40% participate in some sort of extracurricular activity. That's a great question. That makes me wonder. So I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out what that number is, because I don't know. And I don't know. We have several, particularly in athletics, we have several students that participate in local athletics. So it may seem like a larger number to me, and I'm not considering the students who have, played in sports or multiple sports. But that's a great question.
Thank you.
So I'm surprised I haven't asked this question privately, just in our regular conversation. So obviously, you had students at Roosevelt now at Sevier. So having worked upstream a little bit now, seeing some of those kids, what have been victory moments of kids that you had earlier, now you're having again? Do you have any victory moments that you can think of that this was a kid that that we were watching here, and now they're there and they're doing better?
Yes, I have victory moments I'd love to share. Particularly, a couple of experiences to mind. We've sort of divvied up our responsibilities as principals. There's a sixth grade is my grade. And they go 7 and we go 8. But so I really got to see a lot of the fifth graders coming up to Roosevelt. So a couple, one that we were really worried about behaviorally, just not sure. And it's like he's been there forever. He just came in, he's been in. I thought I would bet $1,000 that we have to help him. Nope, not a problem. We have a particular fifth grader who came to Roosevelt as an expert student at the end of his fourth year. And really was reading about on a kindergarten first grade level at the end of fourth grade. Probably third grade level at the end of fifth grade. And I just really worried about the student for lots of reasons, but academically. And he's doing fine. I mean, he's getting in a region, we're still working on our reading map, but my fear was he would go in a circle and he would shut down and we would see a behavior struggle. But that's not been the case. So he's done great. There's a 7th grade student who has a lot of adversity in her life that we really nurtured and looked for opportunities for at Roosevelt, and I was afraid when she became a smaller fish in a bigger pond, that she might lose some of her spunk and leadership, and she has not. And so that's exciting.
First of all, let me say you're doing a great job. And I know you might not get that feedback all the time, and it's daunting, first of all, to sit here. And second of all, to inherit a middle school, and to do it in the COVID. So I tip the hat to you. You're doing great. Just keep doing it.
She's still here, we're happy.
I mean, I couldn't imagine doing your job and going with what you go through. And what strikes me is that you notice the one. The comments that you said tonight and other things that we've engaged in, you notice kids individually as who they are. Do you dig in and find out the why behind those kids? So you're saying that this one kid, you're sure he's going to come in and they're going to have issues. When you're pleasantly surprised, do you dig in and find out what is it? What made it break the right way? How did we fix this, or how did we help here?
Yes, we do. We do sort of dig in and find out. A lot of that work is done some with our counselors. And one of the things that I think particularly is helpful is our fifth grade teachers from our feeder schools really take a lot of time to make notes on rising fifth graders and what they might need, what we might expect. And they know a lot of our sixth grade teachers and will say, I think this student will be good with this team. He needs or she needs a lot of nurturing, maybe a lot of structure, whatever the case may be. So that there's a lot of intentionality that goes into for sixth grade students. And likewise with seventh grade, when we see the roster like work. But we do try to dig in and find out what the why is behind the success or not. You know, what did we miss? What did we not catch? But a lot of that goes back to that social emotional piece. And are we teaching students to self-regulate? Because some of our students are not getting that anywhere except at school. And so that's where they're learning how to regulate emotion, how to respond to adversity. So I think a lot of it.
Well, I commend you for it. You compose yourself quite well even under stress. I think that's has to be in your blood and DNA to be able to do that. And middle school, it goes from 0 to 1,000.
It does. It absolutely does.
And then that's just called money, right?
Right. Actually, that's what we're having in on Monday. But
I think that answer, though, the thing that you said would keep you up and that you're concerned about is how do you overcome the deficiencies being handcuffed this year and having the hybrid model and having kids out of school. This is going to be a lasting effect. But I think digging in and finding the why behind the success is what's going to drive the success of these kids going forward and staff to be able to address that. And this isn't the last thing. They don't become better kids.
right. And one thing that we did, and I didn't mention this, but with our one-year plan, one thing that the leadership team did, and leadership team has some huge, FYI. But one thing we did is we looked at multiple pieces of that to find out what our current reality is. We didn't just look at academic data. We looked at behavioral data. We looked at attendance data. We did look at academic data, and we broke that down. We looked at subgroup data in each of those categories. And so it's really digging in to look for the why. And if we know the why, then we can put some intervention in place to keep that student supported and moving forward. So I imagine that that's what we'll be doing going forward, even more so as we move forward our academic delay class for our summer students, really digging into that data and finding out what those students need and how we can provide those.
If you could capture that, I would love to see that. First of all, how the data that you're talking about and then the intervention that you put in place, because I think this is a model for helping other schools, other districts, or anybody, because there's going to be many. The entire country is going to struggle with this. And I think if we find a success story, I'd love to share it.
I'm hoping we have a success story.
Thank
I'm
you.
counting on it. Thank you. Our students are counting.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And your presentations help us to be more cognitively aware of what's going on in the school, but also more emotionally involved with, especially with stories about the students and successes. Thank you so much for your leadership. Dr. Koo, you coming back with us and oh, Dr. Ford. Oh, I gotta look at the special ed. Sorry.
That's okay, that's okay.
I'm so sorry.
That's all.
Your mom has something to do. Somebody has to do.
But
Thank you for being here.
Thank you all for
Before
having
she
me.
gets started, I also want to, she's newly minted Dr. Wolf. And so congratulations for reaching that milestone.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I am Jackie Wolf, Director of Special Ed. I think this is our first board meeting together, so welcome and thank you for, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all tonight and give you an update on our special ed programming for the district. The first slide, the first couple of slides are just some information, just to bring your attention back to the things that we support in our special ed department. These are our key highlights. You know, what do we really do when students don't learn? Of course, we provide specialized learning environments, early intervention, transition supports. All the things that you see on the left of this screen can be found on our special ed website. And a lot of those resources are for parents and communities, teachers, all the things that they may need to know about special ed services that we provide in the district. Again, just bringing your attention back to special ed and IDEA as a district, we are required to serve students from age 3 through age 22. And we do provide services for all of our students in that age range. The goals of the special education department were created 5 years ago when we went through a visioning process and we created a team that came together and looked at what should we be doing as a special ed department. And these 5 goals were drafted at that time, and every time we come together and talk about programming for students, we go back to these goals and ask ourselves if what we're putting in place meets the expectation of that goal for our special ed students in the district. So the most important part is, of course, our students, and I wanted to just show you some data from this year and past years. This slide shows you our special ed population over the last 5 years. This was a December count for each year. You can see we're pretty consistent. We're typically over 1,200 students across the district that we provide services for special education. Looking at this year, starting in August, this shows you our month to month just for this current school year. Typically in August, we have a fluctuation because we have students who are moving in and out of the district, and so it takes us a little while to get everybody enrolled as far as pieces up. So you can see that maybe why August is a little lower. We also add preschool students all year long. As soon as they turn 3 years old, we start serving them, and so that also you'll see increases as time goes on. Yes.
So I think we've not had this conversation, so I think it would be important for us. So the percentage of students that we get, or the number of students that we have in our district that have special needs, as compared to other districts. So our proportion of students we serve,
We've been running between 16 and 18%.
15 to 18%. So typical other size districts our size are typically
Probably 12 to 15. We're a little bit higher for a district our size compared to other districts.
and I think I know the answer to this one, but I want to see what you say. So why do you think the other
We went back and forth on this a little bit. I do think we have families who move into our district for special ed services. We, have a good reputation for what we're able to provide for students with disabilities. So I think that we see that increase. I also think our teachers do a really good job at not letting students slip through the cracks. When they see a student who is struggling, they get that student in intervention and really start to work the process to determine if that student would benefit from special education services. So I think it's twofold. I think we do have families that move here for that, but I think a larger percentage is probably attributed to the teachers in our building that do a really good job at identifying students who need services.
I thought that was a piece of information that was good for them to know in relation to other school districts and things of that nature.
Thank you. The next one gives you a percentage of our students with disabilities. Again, this shows you that we're around 1,250 typically, approximately 15 to 18% of the student population. And our school percentages vary from about 8% to about 27%. And the breakdown that you see there is by school. I didn't list school names, but you can see that the elementary schools differ quite a bit. The middle schools are pretty similar, and then our high school, of course, keeping in mind that is one building for us. But I did go ahead and pull a 612 at the end of that. But this just, again, breaks it down by school. You will see some of our elementary schools may have a higher percentage because they actually do house our specialized learning environments. So that does make their special ed population a little larger than the other elementary schools.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I see on the next slide, you're gonna break down the disabilities are. Are there kids who roll in and roll out of these? Like, is that number static or does it fluctuate based on the improvement? What I'm saying is, do you fix the disability or is it something that's
It depends. We will see students who, for instance, may be identified as a student with a learning disability in basic reading skills. We may see that fluctuate to through reading fluency and comprehension, but they typically will not necessarily move away from, say, if they are a student identified with an autism diagnosis or other health impairment. It would be more of looking at developmental delay, transitioning into something else or a specific learning disability in a different content or skill deficit area.
So like a speech and language impairments. I know this because I've had two children go through them and they both graduated. from the
Yes,
program.
yes.
So that's why I wonder how many kids end up coming in and coming out of the program.
We do see some fluctuation in that transition. Speech language is definitely one of those areas where the goal is to graduate a student. We want to see that speech language pathologist be able to work with them, close that gap, that skills gap, and then graduate and no longer need speech services. The same with students who may qualify because of occupational therapy or physical therapy needs. We will often see those students transition out as well. And so you brought my attention to this slide. This does break it down by identified eligibility. I want to be clear about a couple of things on this slide. This is only by primary disability. We do have students who are identified in more than one area. For instance, if you, Mr. Gold mentioned speech or language impairment, this shows 433 students as speech or language impaired. We actually provide speech or language services to over 900 students in the district. So for some of those students, it's because that eligibility is a secondary eligibility, or because of their disability, they receive those services. Often students with autism or other health impairments, developmental delays, those students may also receive speech. So this gives you a picture by eligibility, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the number of students receiving a specific service. The other thing to keep in mind is this is also an educational disability, not necessarily a medical disability. Those may look very different. They have to meet a specific eligibility criteria to have an educational disability. It has to impact the impact.
So, make sure I'm reading the chart correctly.
Sure.
So deaf blindness is 0. That means they have to be both deaf
And blind.
And we have none of those.
We have none of those
But
currently.
we have 3 that have, they're blind or severely visually impaired.
Yes.
So that is the numbers in it. They have to have that combination.
Yes, yes. And the ones that are on the yellow, those are our top 5 areas of identification. But I wanted to list the others so you can see where we are serving students currently in the district. The other thing I was looking we don't, for developmental delay, something to keep in mind is students can only have that eligibility until they are 9 years old. And then after that, we have to determine if they meet eligibility in another area. The next one shows you our funding sources. How do we provide services to all of the students that we currently support? So we do have funding from several sources. The first one, of course, is our general purpose budget. Then we have 2 IDEA budgets. Part B can be used for students pre-K through 12. 619 can only be used for students in our pre-K program. And I listed the top areas where we fund out of each of those budgets. The other one, this year, we actually received an Iba Innovation Grant. I'm making the assumption that is a 1-year opportunity because it can only be used for supplies and materials or equipment for remote learning. The other 2 there have the asterisk. Those are competitive grants that I apply for each year. And we've been fortunate to get those 3 grants for a couple of years now. So the hope would be that each year we continue to get those, even though the 2 partnership grants, each year, the amount that we are funded decreases. We can't apply for the full 100%. This year, we were only granted 70%. This coming grant year, we will only be able to apply for 50% of that. So we have to make up the difference.
Is it completely sundown or is it stopped?
It will go 50, then 30, and then it's gone. And we have been able so far to make up that difference out of our IDEA budget, Part B, for those things so far. These are the people in our district who support our special ed students. I thought it was very important to know that it doesn't just take our teachers or our instructional assistants or our related support staff. It takes all of these people to provide the services and supports that we put in place for each student. We have a deaf educator in the district. We have a vision specialist. We're very fortunate to have 3 full-time school psychologists. There are other districts in our region who do not even have one on site. They have a contract with that. So we are very fortunate to have those people in our school. We have 10 speech language pathologists. So when you think about that, that seems like a lot. But then I go back to remind you, we provide services for over 900 students. So that is still a very large caseload for our speech language pathologists. We have 10 special education bus drivers who do a fabulous job with our students. And then, of course, other folks on there to note are our behavior support specialists, our health assistants that work within our classrooms. All of these people on this list make it possible to do what we do in our special ed department and in our schools. This year, I wanted to do this report a little bit differently. I wanted to pick a couple of areas to highlight. One of those areas that I wanted to really talk about this year is our early intervention program, really focusing on our students with disability ages 3 to 5. Right now, these are all of the classrooms that we have students with disabilities supported in. We have classes at Palmer Early Learning Center, at Johnson Elementary School, B.O. Dobbins. You can see several of our elementary schools. And these classes look very different depending on which building you are in. At Palmer Early Learning Center, we have a transition class, which is for our students who are not quite 4 yet, so they do not qualify to be in a voluntary pre-K program or Title I program, but have made too much progress to remain in our 3-year-old program. So that's our transition program. It's only for students with disabilities. And then from there, those students transition to our VPK SPED partnership program at Palmer, and those are blended classrooms. They are fully inclusive and are served by a special ed teacher, a gen ed teacher, and 2 instructional assistants. That same model is in place at Johnson Elementary School for 4-year-old programs, and then we have our 3-year-old class at Johnson. And if you want go to that classroom. And it will definitely, you will leave there with less energy than what you went into it with. But that is only for students with disabilities as well. We have 2 teachers in that classroom, a full-time instructional assistant, and most of the time there are 12 to 15 3-year-olds running around that classroom. At VO Dobbins, we do provide services for the 6 classrooms that are housed there. Most of those services are either related services, speech, OT, and PT, and consultation. The same for those programs at Jackson, Lincoln, Kennedy, Adams, and Washington. We do have special ed students in all of those gen ed programs. We have students whose families are just not ready for their students to be coming to school yet because they're still little. And in those cases, we provide drop-in services, family appointments, and they come in and still get their speech, OT, and PT provided by the district. And so you can see there, we have about 39 to 40 preschool 3-year-olds and about 43 preschool 4 or 5-year-olds enrolled currently. And keeping in mind, our 3-year-olds is going all year long. So I think we're gonna pick up 8 more between now and the end of this year, at least.
Is that number,
No, please go ahead.
is that number pretty consistent year over year, that 45, or have you seen an increase over the past 5 years or so?
We have seen a substantial increase over the past few years. I think we presented on that, I want to say 2 years ago, and I think it had doubled in the last several years from where we were. And we added 2 special ed teachers 2 years ago. I'm looking to David and Jim. 2 years ago, we had to add 2 new special ed teachers to support our preschool students.
Comment I was gonna make, I got to see some incredible data at Palmer Early Learning Center today in the classroom. Between there and the performance of the entire group, it's just some really, really fascinating things. Dr. Dorn came and presented some of that, but I got to see some of that because that blended classroom is a new model.
Yeah, so I will definitely talk about that. I work very closely with Dr. Doran. I will say we are one of the few districts in the state who have found a way to truly blend our programs into a fully inclusive model, who have worked together to put our Title I, our BPK, and our special ed funds together to do a truly inclusive model. Most districts that we talk to do not do that. Their BPK director is a separate entity. Their special ed director works in isolation. Their Title I director. So again, we're very fortunate that Dr. Dorn and I work very closely together to make sure that we have a fully inclusive model and we use our funds most efficiently to do that. And that's where when I talk about trends on this next one, right now, you asked about our numbers. They do continue to increase. We receive a list of 2-year-olds every month from the Tennessee Early Intervention System to let us know when students will be turning 3 and coming to us. Because if they're picked up by that TEIS system, then they qualify for at least an evaluation to see if they get services when they turn 3. We already know and have that list through October of 2021, and it has 37 students on it already. That will start between May of 2021 and October of 2021.
Socioeconomic breakdown of these students.
I do not. That is something I could get. We typically don't have that. What I will tell you is that if they qualify for Title I or BPK because of socioeconomic status, we put them on one of those rosters to help fill those classrooms. So that would be very easy data for me to get for you because we have it. I just don't have it in hand.
So had a little bit of a conversation, Dr. Simmons might jump in here with you to verify some of these numbers, but right now this would be students with disabilities, but necessarily some students that are students that qualify for BPK, we just don't have the classrooms. And so, and what I find fascinating in bullet number 3 is we were talking about this, that if we can get upstream, you know, that if we can get them into pre-K programs, and we think about the gaps that it's the kid that comes into kindergarten not ready, that we spend the rest of the time trying to make up for. That if we could get them into the kids that qualify, we could get them in, that they're decreasing. Like, what if they participate in pre-K, we're decreasing the number of kids that have to come into specialized learning environments on the other side of that. And so, knowing that we have 100 that are sitting out there that qualify to want to come in, and we just don't have space for them, I think that could be a problem with practice that we think about as a board and talk about with our city as, you know, if we want to change that trend, we can create opportunities in our early childhood programs to be able to address that.
But it's $1 now, so it's 9.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my concern as well, is funding for this.
Yeah.
We're doing God's work, there's no doubt about this. But it fortunately doesn't translate to dollars, and that's what I was asking, is if there's a way to get extra dollars from federal funds if they hit a certain criteria. I'm guessing you already looked on this. I apologize, I'm not gonna take.
No, you're fine. I mean, and that, we've often, as special ed directors, when we get together in the region or the state, for instance, going back to the IDA 619 budget that we get, that's earmarked to only spend on preschool. We get $75,000 as a district from IDA for preschool. That covers one full-time instructional assistant, a part-time instructional assistant, and some supplies and materials. That's all we are able to get out of that IDA money that we get.
But you think about the lottery dollars, lottery are supposed to go to colleges and 99.9% of that is gone to higher ed. Okay? So as we think about these other bills that are coming in from sports betting, whether that could those dollars go into pre-Ks.
You don't earmark it, it's not going there.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that was,
I just keep going to higher end.
yeah, that's talking about what you calculate and the bills that are in session right now. Where do those dollars go? We're allocating that 80% of those should be coming to K-12. Right now, I would say let's follow that.
And say specifically more about specifically for this.
No, I mean, but right now, there was supposed to be money that was supposed to be going towards the all going towards scholarships.
I will tell you the collaborative partnership that we have been able to establish with our BPK Title I and special ed programs does make a difference, because now that we have special ed students in all of those programs, it does allow me to support those programs more. And also, we are more strategic with how we spend those Title I and BPK funds between all of those programs. So that collaboration really helps in all areas to support and make sure that you're able to funnel resources appropriately to all of those programs. Thank you. And again, with Dr. Dorn and Dr. Lamar Smith, also with that Title I money that we're able to get. But you can also see, we note on here that positive growth is evident for students with disabilities who participate in those early intervention programs prior to kindergarten. We have seen the number of students that leave early intervention and go to our specialized learning environments has decreased as we continue to establish more inclusive practices in our early intervention. And this last bullet, we continue to be recognized at the state level for our inclusive practices at the early intervention level. We have teachers who present at state conferences each year, and they are asked specifically by the State Department to come and present on our practices. I think that definitely deserves to be recognized for those teachers. Our next steps, we are currently working on a vertical curriculum alignment for our preschool preschool and for early intervention programs to make sure that what we were doing in our 3-year-old program aligns with the skills they need as 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and going into kindergarten. And we wrote a grant to be able to pay stipends to our team as a team to establish curriculum alignment. We are also working on an adoption for our preschool curriculum. Currently, right now, that curriculum is teacher created. And so that we are working to find a curriculum that aligns with what we are doing for our 4-5s that we can fully use in our 3-year-old program. We're continuing to look at best practices for transition from early intervention to kindergarten, and we want to extend or expand our opportunities for inclusive practices at all ages. Right now, I mentioned that our 3-year-old program is only a special ed program because there's not any other option to support those students, and I don't have the staff to be able to bring in gen ed peers in those classrooms. So right now, that is only a special ed program. Any other early intervention questions? I'll move on to what I felt like was probably the next area that you would have the most questions about is how have we been providing services and supports for our special education students in the midst of COVID. Really looking at remote choice, looking at those times we've been on a hybrid schedule, and then those times when we've had to close or been virtual. So I wanted to talk a little bit about starting in March of 2020. I started having weekly collaborations with special ed directors and TDOE across the state. Through that, we were able to implement COVID-19 procedures for special ed students. We created an FAQ document that went out to all special education staff, and it was updated as often as we were getting information from TDOE, as often as we were coming up with better ideas and better ways of doing things. That document was revised and continually pushed out to special ed personnel. We established some best practices for how we were going to handle virtual learning, what those services might look like, and how we would provide that support. We talked about how we were going to continue to have IEP meetings when we weren't in buildings, because during this time, IEPs were expiring, evaluation, assessments were coming due, so we had to talk through those practices, and how to get student learning materials out to students that needed them. And so we really started, we found a system for mailing out materials, putting materials on porches, and pushing out things through our parent portal. And this was a good thing that came out of this, was we had a lot of special ed teachers and practitioners who weren't using Class Dojo like a lot of our other teachers were. And this kind of forced them to look into that and see how they could use that to stay in contact with parents. So we saw a lot more of that happening, and parents being able to, be reached through that avenue. We continued with creating independent learning plans for all special ed students. So not only did they have a IEP, but they also had an individual learning plan where we talked to parents about what would special ed services look like during any type of closure. We created a comparable services document, and I'll show that to you, that basically said, for instance, if a student had 2 hours of IEPs or special ed services in their IEP each day, they would get at least 2 phone calls and 30 minutes from a special ed teacher each week. We wanted that to be consistent for all of our students, and we sat down as a team and really talked about what that should look like and established those protocols for every student. We worked with one of our therapy partners and put in teletherapy options. So during the closure, every student who received speech, OT, and PT was offered teletherapy to meet their needs during this time. We provided Wi-Fi devices for any student who did not have internet access, and we also came up with a way to get manipulatives and supplies and materials and task boxes out to any of our students who were not able to access learning through technology. We had Google and Zoom meetings with individual students and small groups during this time. Special education teachers also joined core content classes with general education teachers to help provide additional support when they were having their class sessions. Our behavior analysts and behavior specialists continue to provide social, emotional, and behavior supports, and they did that through Class Dojo. They sent out letters to each individual parent and family of students that had behavior intervention plans or behavior supports in place before school was dismissed. And then we also created video lessons and therapy activities, and we pushed those out through Google Extensions, YouTube, and Screencast-O-Matic. And then we also had hundreds of virtual IEP meetings during this time. This, I know this is very small, but this was the document that we created to guide support providers, whether that was a teacher or one of our occupational therapists. It did not matter. This was their guide to providing services to special ed students during any time of closure. So that, again, we were very consistent on what that would look like, and parents knew what to expect if we were ever on a closure as well. And this was whether it was a 1 or 2 week closure or whether it was a long-term closure. This is what they could expect. During the first semester, when we looked at remote choice, we had about 375 students who selected remote choice, students with disabilities. We are down to about half of that. We're about 170 going into the second semester. You can see the breakdown on this screen. We have 4 special ed teachers who do remote choice only. They support our virtual or remote students 100% of the time. And then we have 9 teachers who do a hybrid. And most of those are teachers in our specialized learning environments who have students on campus and then students who are remote, and they wanted to keep the students on their roster as even those who are remote choice. And then we have 2 SLPs who provide only speech services for our remote choice students, and then our OT and PT is provided by one of our contract providers. This gives you an idea of what we're doing. We are continuing for our RCL students to provide academic supports, related services. We still have our IEP meetings, and we're doing evaluations and assessments. We either do those virtually or we offer parents the option to bring in a student for a one-on-one evaluation with the assessor who's doing that evaluation. Any questions on our remote choice or hybrid virtual option? Just to bring back around to things that we do all the time, again, we provide a continuum of services, everything from push-in support for students who are on consultation to our homebound services that happen right now. The top of the pyramid, we thought we would see an increase in homebound services during this time, and we really have not, and that could be attributed to the RCL option, but we did not see an increase in homebound services this year, which was a bit surprising. We were ready for that. We provide, again, all of these services and supports, push-in support for classes. We do skills deficit intervention. We do have our specialized learning environments. Our related services, we have a very long list of related services, and most of those services are provided by people in-house. We contract for very little. Most of the time is provided by our own employees. Our transition school to work program is still going very, very strong, and then our early intervention that we talked about earlier. One thing to note is we do have a partnership with Tennessee School for the Blind that allows, when we were talking about our blind and visually impaired students, we do partner with them, and they come in and provide some extra resources. We We actually have a student in the district who is a Braille reader and is learning painting, and so TSB comes in and really supports us in that process. We have an interpreter that works with one of our hearing impaired students so that they're able to access all of their classes in a setting. And then we also have behavior intervention supports. We're very fortunate to have a board certified behavior analyst. We have a behavior specialist, and through a partnership with Friends of Health, we also have a therapist. And that therapist works with our gen ed and special ed students. But they all three work as a collaborative team in the district. We have 3 areas of specialized learning environments: our functional academics, communication and behavior, and our behavior programs. And things that we do in a typical year beyond the classroom. Unfortunately, we've not got to see these things as much this year, but we still have our Sparkle Squad, our Top Games, our Buzz program, Transition School Work, our Service Learning Project, and Small Miracles. And Ms. Will actually mentioned the partnership with Small Miracles. They're a great partner for our students with disabilities in the district. A few pictures. Unfortunately, most of these are not recent. We've not been able to do a lot of these activities this year. And then when we think about moving forward, we know we still have some room to grow, some things that we would like or have as goals for our department. Again, I mentioned adopting that curriculum for our pre-kindergarten 3 program. We want to expand our options for social, emotional, and behavioral supports to really make sure that we're providing wraparound supports. I know social, emotional learning has been mentioned several times, but when we think about our students with disabilities, and then we add trauma and social, emotional situations as well, we need to find ways to put those wraparound services in place. We want to revisit our services and supports that are provided by specialized learning environments to make sure that we're meeting students' needs, and streamline the use of our intervention programs across the district and schools to make sure that we have everything we need at each school, and the students, if they're transient from one school to another, don't lose out on something that they were doing in another school. Our big goal for this summer is to create a special education parent university. We really want to find a way to get our parents more information about what it means to support their student with a disability in schools, from the very beginning of the initial referral process to transition out of high school. Our goal is to hold monthly meetings for parents where we talk about different ways to support their students, provide different information sessions and resources throughout the school year. And then we're also, like everyone else, currently planning for summer opportunities for extended school year compensatory services and enrichment intervention during the summer. Which was a lot.
No, you have a huge job. And I think it's just to underscore that your program deals with about 1 out of every 6 students in the system. I don't know that we have anything that deals with 1 out of every 6 students across the spectrum of our schools. My experience and my observation, I think the special education program has been the greatest strength. A lot of people pay attention to a number of areas. My colleague, Mr. Bill, said we're doing a lot of work.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any questions or comments?
I want to give you all the money I can.
I'll take all the money you can give me. I promise we can put it to good use.
More than 30 good use. I just wanted to share a story, and I'm going to have to ask apologies to this person to this mom, because I've been asked permission to share it, but I don't usually have a problem with this. That her daughter graduated, and if all the teachers that had worked with her did not go to her house and congratulate her, they stood outside. This was 2020, she graduated, and that mom broke down and cried. She broke down and cried again when she told me the story, and I can't keep it together right now. Because as a parent, I cannot imagine just the unknowing of, what am I gonna deal with this, with my child, and I want only the best, well, every parent does. But to have that headwind in doing that, and to see the work that you're doing for those kids, it just, like I said, I'm gonna give you all the dollars we can, because I think you're just doing amazing stuff, and I know.
Rob, where did he go? Did you hear that?
This happened.
Her budget. But no, it's, more or less point, is the stitch in time right now will save 9 down the road. And to be able to blend and put these kids back into the environment, they're just like everybody else. And they feel like that, and they think like that, and they raise their gaze to see the things that they can achieve. And I think that's phenomenal. So I just want to
Thank you, appreciate that.
I just want to say, I can't imagine, I think it would be a challenge to work with a lot of special ed, with the energy that you all do on a daily basis. It's warranted, it's kudos down, but the fact that you guys have been able to do it in our messed up school system this year, whether we're hybrid, remote, some of the kids can't come to school because of immune system issues, what you guys seeing that slide, I'm flabbergasted. I think that's like a full-time job times 2 just to be able to do everything that you did. So I don't think you're getting the recognition that you deserve. I'm glad you're here and made a lot of us aware of it, because I knew it was happening, but we didn't realize the amount of time behind the scenes that you guys have done in this school year. So thank you very much for everything you've done and for that.
I appreciate that. Again, we have a very strong special ed department, and that's not just here, that's the teachers and instructional assistants, all those are service providers who are really doing that work at the school level and pouring their, hearts into everything they do. It wouldn't be possible without their dedication, and I'm sure sleepless nights during this time.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Okay, Dr. Drew, let's see if I can get it right this time.
And with your permission, I would like to ask Mr. Nash to join as well. The piece of this.
You have a small chair that you use for picture.
I just wanted to come back to you. It's been a while since we've had a conversation about this issue, this topic, and wanted to kind of be able to share some information, answer some questions regarding Indian Highland Park. And kind of just take you through a little bit of a presentation here of where we are with Indian Highland Park. Familiarize you with it if you are not familiar with all that goes on there, and talk a little bit about some vision that we have for that space. Right now, really the main purpose, the main reasons we're utilizing Indian Highland Park, you can see there, really fall into categories of athletics, with the soccer complex. There's also some concession restroom areas. Also with softball, soccer, softball, there's a space for the there's some open space, there's some public seating, the observation tower, but really, I think we see it in the future with a vision to be more than it is now. Just really wanted to share that conversation with you. So if you're not familiar with where Indian Highland Park sits, it does sit just on the northeast side of campus across Center Street from back of Dallas Bennett, line with Park Street on the west of the close down. We also utilize the parking area on the really southwest side of Indian Highland Park. That has been developed over the last several years. It's really the main parking area. So when we think about, I think what we wanted to do is really just talk about vision and what could be with this space and the impact it could have. We wanted to show you a slide that kind of shows where it is right now, the current uses that we talked about. And then also talk a little bit about visioning on the Dallas Bennett campus. And it's a little blurry, but that picture is probably not as simple as you think that is. This is the, if you play along, you know where that is, question. If you're familiar with where that location is.
Right.
That's good. It's big Kingsport. This is a view, Google Earth view from 1999. Not that long ago. You kind of see it on the side of campus, what that looked like. That's what it looks like now.
Back, we noted during that time, there were still houses and residences along that road. I can remember experiencing that as an assistant principal early 2000 in that region.
So when you see what Sevier Court looks like now, again, going back to kind of its current, but then what it looked like as late as 1999. And then the work that has been done. I think one of the reasons why we thought it was important to have this conversation is, when you look back at 1999, I would dare say at that point, they did not necessarily, when I say they, I think about leadership, administration, board, may not have had in mind what that was going to look like. But thankfully, they had the vision to know that it was going to be something that was going to impact our community. I remember being in a visioning conversation with some of the band staff several years ago, and they were talking about what keeps us to the next level. And one of the things was a 365-day-a-year rain or shine practice. And I think what kind of sparks us to talk about it in our park is this example is, thank goodness, the leaders back in the late 90s, early 2000s had the vision that something needed or could happen with Sevier Court. They didn't know what it was then. But was band practice being discussed back then?
It was starting to be discussed, but there was a little store. I don't know if you remember, just across the street there. That was like our first purchase, to try to expand parking, and I mean, it started then. So you're right. We had an idea what it could be, but it's still not nearly where it needs to be.
I think our inspiration for the conversation is, thank goodness that people had the foresight to move forward. And what is it that we can think about when it comes to any Highland Park, knowing that we are on the campus at DB, fairly landlocked, and that this is actually a project that started back in 2003. As when these property purchases started, you kind of see the areas that are there in red, and the year in which those properties were purchased. So we're already now 18 years into, I guess, the vision. We just felt it was important to bring this back to the surface, because there are some properties that are available, have been available. They will come and go over time, but what could this whole area look like as we move forward in the next 5, 10, 20 years? What do we need to do? Conversations we need to have. This is a slide I pulled out of the presentation that we put together last spring. To just kind of reemphasize that point. And it shows the properties we have purchased previously. If you have not noticed, that larger red block there is where the church is at. Not been by there lately. The church has been taken down. So that clearly is taken place. And it really provides, again, the beginning of the opportunity for the concept of soccer. And last spring, these were the properties that were available when we really started to first kind of put this information together. This is where we sit as of today, with properties that are currently available. Obviously, all of these at time. That one yellow property over there, by the soccer field house, had a trailer on it. So Jim has lived as administrator. He lived it with state courts. We look at this and say, okay, what is it? What are the conversations we need to have to think about whether and how we move forward as these properties become available? Talk about kind of vision. So what we have done over the last several months is to really convene just the red space that we currently have there, the green outline, if we would over time continue to purchase those properties in order to decide function, continue to build out. So we looked at a visioning committee last spring, summer, administrators, school administrators, to start just talking about what this would look like, what it currently is being used for, and what it could be. Again, I don't think we have locked ourselves, anyone has locked ourselves into what we want it to be. That's what we're asking is to use what could it to kind of think through that decision process. We really landed on three major areas. One involving athletics, one the impact you could have on academics, and then just the general expansion of opportunity, so if you look at the athletic side of it, some of it is what it currently what could be placed there, but also we talk about something like tennis. Do we look at relocating our current tennis courts across the street? We've done some general mapping. There's some opportunities there, depending on layout, how that could look. I think keep your head on that, that tennis question. We'll come back to that in a slide or two. But as far as we hear a lot of conversations with the city about tennis. Are there conversations to be had there when it comes to something like additional courts? Right? We have 6. I think the athletic department will say competition needs the number. So is there a way to expand that? Is there a way, again, is it an indoor facility, or just a city? We know lacrosse is a kind of space for that. So we look at how we expand our footprint forward, and that's an area to look at potentially for lacrosse. I think there's an exciting opportunity to think about academics. If it's academics on that space, you can see there, we talked with folks in Senate and CNI folks. There's some opportunities here when it comes to technology, staying our program or programming or string programming. And then what happens if we go, for instance, we come out of tennis? What if we move tennis courts and open up that footprint for academic opportunities when it comes to expansion on within the correct triangle on campus? When you look at an aerial of that space, a pretty significant space is taken up. Is there ways that we could, by looking at those, open up educational opportunities? I see there's some general ideas of again, expanding on where we currently sit. Is there an indoor outdoor practice field there? Is it expanding the parking for the current usage? Adding things like bathroom concession, more tennis and softball opportunities. Give me a minute. I'm rambling on a bit.
No, I think you're saying very well in terms of we need to have an open mind into what potentially those things could be and as needs arise. I mean, for example, your references to stream and those activities probably 5, 8, 10 years ago, that really wouldn't have been on the table the way it is now. And so just being open to what those opportunities could be, will be, things that we haven't even thought of yet, but we are so landlocked on our current campus, it's like 35 acres. I just think to know that we have the potential to grow and expand down the road, to have programs to serve our students and our community.
So really, our whole intent tonight is just kind of further the conversation and have it in our minds to think about as these properties become available on Park Street. Obviously, these are things that if we were to be asking for people on, we wanted you to kind of why as these come available and to understand the thought process as we think about the vision for this space, how it can, the work that we can do now is going to benefit the students in the community long after work on it. But if we don't do the work now, that foundation will be laid for that future success. So that was really the extent of
was talking about back when we were trying to get, I made reference to it last time we met, about, man, where did a child get hurt there, crossing over to the practice field? And how long, how many they had to do it before T-Dot would act, and the child did, T-Dot acted. So it's been talked about. I'm sure it's been dropped since. I'm sure you probably think about Science Hill situation, something similar to that. I think T-Dot was talked to. I'm sure it's about discussing a long time. You don't think about your presentation, I just want to say. With those properties, we got daunting capital needs. There's no doubt about that. And this feels like a little bit of icing. But the thing about it, we need to consider and remember is those properties, we need to be nimble about the availability of those properties. Because if you're not ready to act, the opportunity quickly slips away. And I feel your sense of urgency, and I'm sharing that. If we're not, we're so landlocked, if we're not committed to that, which I experienced, we bought the store and I thought we were moving that way. We have some, but not nearly at the pace it probably is. But it's all about money, right?
No, I think that's part of it, but, you know, one of the things I'm very excited about. Potential that you're talking about. But one of the things I want us to include in this conversation, agree with Mr. Dean on being nimble about acquiring property. The other thing we need to be nimble about is doing something with that property when we acquire it, as opposed to letting it sit there and disintegrate the neighborhood. And so I want us to be sensitive to that as well as you mentioned churches at that. I don't know how long that's been there.
It was, yeah, it hasn't been, it was used as a reminder as office space prior to this building being built. And it has actually student services and those programs there, but it's not been used other than for storage for the past 6+ years. And then just last month, I think.
Right now, how does this expand our security concerns with the campus? How do we cover, how do we maintain that as a safe space 24/7? Being where it is. I'm just saying being distant from the main campus itself.
I would not presume to have that full answer as we are at this point. I think it is something that we would need to consider. I think it, in some ways, creates opportunities to improve our safety concern in some areas. I think about some of the distance travel right now, for instance, our kids going to the soccer building, where they have to park, the condition of that area. We have the potential to improve that right now. And so I think there are some, obviously there's some things we need to address when it comes to meeting this, but I think there's the opportunity.
Sure.
That's a great part of whatever plan that needs to be fully adopted there.
Thank you very much. Great job.
I think even returning it to the soil to maintain security, improving it somewhat, but instead of dividing the house. So I agree. Like took it down and your husband.
I would think the city would be a lot more receptive to partnership and expansion of these kinds of properties and the facilities that will occupy those properties. And it's, I would think that would be a receptive ear as we, I would assume, as we move forward, but we got to stay focused on it.
They are. It was in conversation with the city. The city had in just recent conversations said anytime we acquire something, we'll work on the demolition, getting that taken care of.
So how many tennis courts can we get on one of those properties?
I'm not an engineer, but if I cut out a piece of paper that matches our current tennis courts and use an overlay, we have looked at positioning through their tennis there is sufficient room there to do something substantial. If we would look to move this over there. And you've got, again, how we vision this and what the final project looks like, I would not presume we want to necessarily declare.
They have a STEM project that watches.
I was just making certain that I was going to stop the field if you wanted to do cross and tennis. I just can't visualize the space, I'm not good at that.
Correct.
I'm gonna catch them all. But anyway, that's what I was trying to visualize, if anybody knew. I think that's what we get on those.
That would be something obviously we would need to engineer, how we use the entire space, but just in looking at some very rough, kind of estimations, I think we feel confident that there's an opportunity to do something.
What would be nice, I'm as excited about that. I'm sorry.
One question I have is, we have a good feel for the amount of parking that we have there. Is it adequate?
I'm speaking anecdotally, but if I'm out there on a night where there's a soccer game, it's tight. If you're out there where there's soccer and softball, there's a significant amount of folks who are across the street parking on campus. There's many nights, and there are nights where you'll have multiple events. You'll have track and softball and music. Parking is something beyond just student parking. There are students parking there across the street. But on event night,
It is typically full, and the other, you don't get there early, then you're parking across the street from the main campus, across the wall.
Anecdotally, that's an observation as well.
and you have nights where you'll have soccer and track and tennis and practice.
Was problems to consider.
Absolutely.
Not saying.
Well, and I just want to comment for the rest of the board, I think, even though we do have very significant capital needs over the next 2 years. Most of the academic buildings and building innovation. This type of thing is very opportunity-based. Even if we do choose to acquire property, even if we don't find everything we're acquiring at a low price. And we don't have to know exactly what that's going to be to see that down the road. We're going to be.
Could easily not be this board that makes that decision.
Exactly.
You may get a call one day.
Come on, man.
Thank you very much.
Well, I did, the other thing that I see on the horizon, if we could move the tennis courts over there, it's the space that was provided on the campus for expanding, potential for expanding CTE programs and things of that nature. I think there's some strategic opportunities that we can share around CTE as well, for programs that we could, be added to our catalog.
When it comes to the location of the tennis courts too, that's the seating facility, the music facility. We look at that as prime space inside the triangle.
Secondary question, do you know how far away we are from resurface tennis courts in cities?
There will need to be some work done on the tennis courts very soon.
2 years past.
2 years ago. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Yes, I'm guessing.
So the reset should be great.